construction of forts. There are the forts that you're aware of, Morris Island, Fort Sumter, but there are smaller forts that are being constructed on middle ground in the harbor. And one of these is Fort Ripley. And at the moment of this story, the planter is engaged in supplies for Fort Ripley. This is a very large vessel. You could put 1,400 bales of cotton on the deck, or you could put 1,000 men on the deck. So this is a very important vessel. It's also a gunboat. It's armed. It has a 32-pound howitzer forward on a pivot, so it can be aimed at whatever it has to shoot at. And it is used in warfare in this area and also down in the Savannah direction. It has a complement of 3 white officers and 8 enslaved crewmen. Robert Smalls is the pilot, although, as I said, he didn't have that title. He's known as one of the best pilots on the whole South Carolina coast, and it is said that he can navigate with his eyes closed, and he probably could. So he knows every shoal, every hazard to navigation, and he would also know the placement of every torpedo. That is a Confederate torpedo that's been recreated there. And if you look at that, the word torpedo, I'm used to hearing that in the context of a weapon that is discharged from a submarine. But this is earlier in naval warfare. This is called a torpedo, but we would now call it a landmine. And if you look at that, it's constructed of a wooden barrel. It is filled with explosives. There is a contact switch there. The 2 ends are made of tin, and they are shaped such that when this is anchored to the bottom of the water and held with chains, it will keep station and stay where it is put. And the intention of the Confederates is to keep the Union from coming into this harbor and taking it. So they are blocking different channels with weapons of this type. Now this has to be precisely placed, and just like today the Coast Guard precisely places buoys in our navigable waters, this has to be precisely placed, which is no small trick to do the piloting and seamanship required to get this thing on station. They give this task to Robert Smalls. Later, when he takes the planter out to the Union, he also takes even more valuable information, which is the location of every torpedo that he ever placed. So he knows how the harbor is defended because he designed it, he executed it. So the planter is tasked with moving these torpedoes in the channel, and that's our harbor, and they also put them in the Edisto River and in the Stono River, because the Stono is considered a backdoor. If the Union wants to attack Charleston, they might be able to sneak around the Stono River and get up here and do that. So this vessel, as you can tell, is really important to the Confederates with all the activities that it is conducting. At this time, the Union is blockading Charleston. Charleston is one of 3 ports that have railroad connections to the interior of the Confederacy and a seaport. So it's highly valuable to the war effort of the Confederacy, and it is therefore so protected. The Union wants to neutralize it, so they establish a blockade. And their blockade runs from Dewey's Inlet by the north end of Isle of Palms, and that was called Long Island back then, south down to Folly. There were 5 channels that led into the harbor, and Robert Smalls knew each one of them intimately because that's what a pilot does. They memorize the waters that they sail in so that they can draw it from memory. And he was able to do that without being able to read the nautical charts because they didn't teach him to read. They wouldn't let him learn to read. So the Confederate defenses include Castle Pinckney, that we still see the remnants of it, a sand island that's being developed in the port called Fort Ridley, and at the mouth of the harbor, Sumter and Fort Moultrie, that they're all out there, and numerous other batteries and movable gun carriages all over the place on both sides of the harbor. There is also a Confederate telegraph system. So that means that you could communicate from Fort Sumter back to headquarters downtown Charleston, which is where the Charleston Yacht Club is down on the Battery today. So this Confederate telegraph system goes between the forts in the harbor and the Stono River. It goes overland, it goes underwater, it goes between Tybee Island and Battery Gregg over on the Folly Beach side, Morris Island. And it's used for communications between General Beauregard and all of those forces out there. And what they are doing is monitoring the efforts of the Union. The Union is sending different vessels out there to blockade. The Confederates are trying to send blockade runners out, receive blockade runners in. So any traffic that is allowed by the Confederates to move in this harbor has to do so with a recognition system that consists of bells and whistles. So it is all organized. So we have the planter being a common site on the harbor. Robert Smalls is familiar with all of these military activities, all of this naval warfare effort that I have mentioned, and he also has a family to protect. If you look at the young lady who's pictured here, this is his wife, Hannah, and their family includes 2 small children and an older daughter of Hannah. So there is an owner that owns this young lady. And this is Samuel Kingman, the owner of Robert Smalls' wife and his young children. Robert Smalls realized that at any time Kingman could break up his family and sell any of his children or his wife, and there would be nothing that could be done to interrupt that. Robert Smalls was a diplomat, and he was able to come up with a deal, a bargain with Kingman, that Robert Smalls, he's allowed to keep minuscule amounts of what he's earning for his own owner, McKee, down in Beaufort. He's able to keep a little bit of that money, he saves it all. The price is $800. It might as well have been $8 million. It was really a high price to pay. After the planter departs the harbor under Robert Smalls' command, Kingman will eventually put in a claim, an insurance claim, for the amount of $2,250 for property left on planter, including the Hannah Smalls, her small children, and their clothing. I just find that quite remarkable. In early 1862, there's an event that happens, and it held great interest for Robert Smalls and the men he worked with on the ship. And here they are. This is a drawing of his partners that are enslaved crewmen on the ship. And the event that happened was that a barge, another barge that had to be rowed. It wasn't powered, like the planter had a wood-fired power plant on it. This barge that belonged to General Ripley was stolen by 15 enslaved persons and rowed out to the Union. And that fact was known on the waterfront. So we are aware that Robert Smalls knew that it could be done, that you could take a vessel and get it out to the Union blockade. So that sparks an idea. And one day, Robert Smalls is off duty, and he is in the wheelhouse of the planter, and he puts a hat on. So I've got a straw hat up there, because that's the hat that the captain of the planter used when he was aboard his vessel. And the captain of the planter also had a special naval officer's coat that he wore. But just wearing that hat and putting his hands on his hips in the manner that the captain of the planter did made the other gentlemen here, friends of Robert Small, remark, you look like Captain Relier, the captain of the planter. You could impersonate him. Robert Smalls advised them to just be quiet, keep that to themselves. When they could, they started a conversation to come up with a plan. So this is going to spark an idea that perhaps Robert Smalls knows how to pilot this vessel in the middle of the night, if there's ever an opportunity, could depart the harbor with it and take others with him who were able to make this perilous journey. So it sparks that particular idea. There will be an opportunity for this, and there's going to be some information, that a military value that Robert Smalls is going to get. This is an area, and that blue right there, what's marked there, that is an area that the Confederates had weapons and had a battery and had guns, but they're being removed. And the Stono River is up in this direction here. So this is the back door to Charleston. And the Confederates are moving their weapons to middle ground in the middle of the harbor. And they are leaving the Stono River open. And Robert Smalls realizes this because on the planter, this is his duty to be involved in the movement of these weapons. He's a rigger. He knows how to move cannon and get them aboard the planter. And for 2 weeks, the planter is involved in removing weaponry from Coles Island battery, putting it on planter, and then they're going to distribute it to other ports, starting with middle ground in the middle of the harbor. And there's also current events in Charleston. We're not sure whether Robert Smalls was aware of this. It's quite possible that he was. There was something called the slave telegraph, which was word of mouth of things that happen in places that are a little bit remote that you could be aware of, even if you weren't able to get newspapers and read them. So this is General Order number 11. This is promulgated on May the 9th, 1862. I'm going to read this. The 3 states of Georgia, Florida, and South Carolina, comprising the military department of the South, having deliberately declared themselves to be no longer under the protection of the United States of America, and having taken up arms against said United States, it became a military necessity to declare martial law. This, accordingly done on the 25th day of April, 1862, slavery and martial law in a free country are altogether incompatible. The persons in these 3 states, Georgia, Florida, and South Carolina, heretofore held as slaves, are declared forever free. So that was signed by David Hunter. He's a Major General commanding of United States Army Union Forces. This is not the last word on that matter. But with this information, we have reason to believe that Robert Smalls understood that if he could get to the Union lines, he would be free. And can he get his family there? And can he get his colleagues there who were also enslaved? Well, his wife, Hannah Smalls, is a enslaved lady, and she is working as a maid in the Mills house. And the plan would be that when she would be notified by Robert Smalls that there was an opportunity to take the planter out of the harbor, that she would make her way to the waterfront with their children. Being aware of that, she also knew that if the planter was successfully taken out of the harbor, the next step was maybe even the most perilous of all. You would then be on a Confederate ship of war, hightailing it in the water towards the Union fleet, who is going to blow you out of the water. So how do you communicate with them? How do you let them know you're surrendering? So one story has it that Hannah Smalls took a white sheet from the Mills house to use as a flag of surrender. I like that version. There are other versions that the white sheet would be found on board the planter just as normal bedding on there. But I like the one that tells us that Hannah understood that. So she would have to walk through Charleston with her children. This lovely photo of this young girl. This is Elizabeth Smalls, the daughter of Robert Smalls, who will escape slavery with her parents aboard the Planter. The plan was for Hannah and the children to be taken downtown to be hidden aboard Etowah. Etowah is another merchant vessel. You can see where this happened. She was to be docked at a place where there's a marker, historical marker down on the Waterfront Park area. And it was a very short distance. It's maybe a quarter-mile distance, but it's not where the Planter is moored. It's down closer to the waterfront area. So the plan is Hannah and the children are hidden aboard Etowah. The Planter is going to escape in the middle of the night. It's going to go and pick them up and then make its way past all of those forts and get out of this harbor and turn itself over to the Union. So to get there, Hannah Smalls has to go through a gauntlet of Charleston streets. She's an enslaved woman. She's not free to wander around Charleston wherever she wants. She can be stopped by anybody and her plan interrupted. She has to make her way all the way down to the waterfront. You might be able to see some masts there of vessels that are down there. She has to quietly traverse the city and get through that perilous journey, and she succeeds in doing it. There were numerous obstacles to her traveling around the city. You see the steeple of St. Michael's Church there. And every night at 9 o'clock or thereabouts, that bell would ring. And any enslaved person found on the streets would be arrested and imprisoned and punished for simply being outside. It was a curfew. So even going to the waterfront and taking the children to hide on the Etowah, this was a scary thing that required a lot of courage from Hannah. So there's a plan because at some point the officers from Planter are a bit tired. They've been working for 2 weeks, removing all those guns from Coles Island, and they want to break. And they disobey the Confederate rule. The rule was that the vessel had to have a Confederate officer aboard at all times, even through the night, even if it's just docked and it's not going anywhere. But all three of them went ashore, Captain Relier and engineers Eric Pitcher and mate John Smith Hancock. So the three of them leave the Planter. Robert Smalls knows that with them ashore, this is his chance. Planter's loaded with ammunition and cargo of military value. He gets the word to his wife, Hannah Smalls, go to the Etowah, hide there. He gets all of the crewmen that are going to escape with him, and they're waiting for nightfall. This is a picture of the actual Planter, and if you can see the smoke rising, this is a daytime picture, of course, but even at night, that smoke was visible, and you could smell it from a distance, and firing up the power plant was a noisy activity. So the night that Robert Smalls is ready to make the escape at approximately 3 a.m., he orders his shipmates to fire up the Planter. And they wait because within 50 feet is a sentry post with armed guards, and the guards pay no attention to this. This is what they think is normal activity of the Planter, because after all, she's supposed to deliver all that weaponry tomorrow to Middle Ground and the various ports, the various forts in the harbor. So Planter is ready to depart. Preparations are concluded. They build up enough steam. It's about 3:30 in the morning. The escape is going to require passing a considerable, formidable array of Confederate outposts, all expecting particular codes, whistle codes. Too long, 2 long blasts and 1 short. That was the code earlier in the day. Robert Smalls does not know if that code has been changed. All the forts have the same signal, and when you're a vessel and you want to pass by a fort, you make that signal. If the fort agrees that you should go, it rings a bell, and then you go on your way. If there's anything amiss, these forts are so close to each other that you would soon come under fire from all the other forts that are supposed to stop this kind of an escape run. Because remember, the Confederates are worried the Union can come in at any time and attack them. So here's the view of Charleston Peninsula looking towards Fort Sumter. The night that we're talking about, Planter builds up enough steam about 3 a.m. and she slips her mooring lines and makes her way to the Etowah. The families board, women and small children board the Planter, and all this goes well, except it takes a little bit longer than they thought. And now it might be that by the time they get to past Sumter, it'll be daylight. And the question is, will Robert Smalls be able to impersonate the real Confederate Captain Relyad, given that light is breaking? So they are going to have to go on faith with this regarding this. So that is the, you can see the armed personnel there that are manning those forts. Here's Castle Pinckney that will have to be passed. The plan is pass Castle Pinckney. There's not a lot of defenders there, but it can make a lot of noise. It can make signals, and it's not hooked up by telegraph, but it can communicate with the other Confederate personnel if there's a problem, like the Planter is leaving and it's unauthorized. So it's going to, we're going to pass Castle Pinckney, and then Fort Ripley. This has to be passed to port, and the women and children aboard Planter have to be hidden because they cannot be seen by any of the Confederates that are manning this fort here. Look at that list there of weaponry. Aboard Planter, we've got a long 32-pound gun, a short 32-pound gun, and a whole list of that. And we also have a list of considerable amount of military munitions, shot for all of these weapons and rifle shells and all kinds of armament that is supposed to be delivered to Fort Ripley in the morning and a couple of other forts in the harbor, and it's all instead going to be given to the Union blockaders. So Ripley is passed, the signal is made, Ripley replies, Planter may pass. The next we have to go to is Fort Johnson. So from the interior of the fort, you can see some weaponry there, but look at that. That's aimed at Robert Smalls. That'll blow him out of the water. I have to pass that. It's pretty far off. I'm going to pass it to starboard, because Planter's going to sea, but still it requires a whistle signals. Robert Planter makes the whistle signals. In the distance, he hears Fort Johnson make their bell sound. Okay, Planter, proceed. So we pass that, he gets in the main ship channel. And the whole time he's doing this, and it is astonishing to me, having been a Coast Guard officer in charge of a ship at sea, he's doing this with utter calmness because he cannot deviate from routine. He cannot let it be known that he's in a hurry. He has to proceed like this is a normal business of the Planter that was going to happen that day anyway. It just happened a little bit earlier. So he's slowly going seaward, and the sun is coming up. But he cannot accelerate his journey out. Next, big guns. So look at all these forts that we have passed, and we are approaching Fort Sumter. And this is the most perilous part of exiting the port, because there's another danger. On the Isle of Tom side of Sullivan, there are rope obstructions and all kinds of chain and wooden planks that the Confederates put in place to keep the blockade out. Because the blockade kept testing this. They kept sending small boats in to try to get in the harbor to do some damage to the Confederates. So the Confederates blocked that channel as best they could. And they put Drummond lights on it. So they had a special light that they could turn on, illuminate the whole harbor, and that light would rob the night blindness of somebody who's driving a ship. If you're in charge of a ship, you're the officer of the deck, at night you need your night vision. And a bright light will rob you of that. You will not be able to see to pilot your vessel. So that's not only are we passing the forts, we have to have the right whistle signals. We have to keep all the women and children hidden. We have the possibility of telegraph communication, because Fort Sumter is wired. It can communicate back to the headquarters of the Confederates. And now we've got the Drummond lights to deal with as well. So Fort Sumter is going to be passed close aboard. Here's where we're told, there's a prayer. O Lord, we entrust ourselves into thy hands, that like thou didst for the Israelites in Egypt, please stand guard over us and guide us to our promised land of freedom. So coming up on Sumter, and the plan here, the persons escaping on the planter had rigged it with explosives. The idea was if they failed here, they would light those explosives. They would destroy the planter, and they would jump into the water and drown themselves. That was the plan. This is so dangerous of an escape. We're going to reach the reach Sumter. Planter gets close aboard, close enough that a voice call is possible, just with a megaphone. It's that close. And Robert Smalls is a big concern because daylight is breaking, and he's trying to impersonate Captain Relier, and will he be detected? But he's not. He's not detected. The planter doesn't have to bother with a whistle signal here. They just yell through a megaphone. The sentries on Sumter just say, "Pass planter." And so we go. So he gets past Sumter, and here is the destination. He's trying to travel out here. The Union is out here. Now this next phase is going to be really perilous. There are several Union vessels out here. They're under the command of Admiral Dupont. He's on another one called Augusta, but the Onward is the closest one here. Now Fort Sumter has passed Planter. Fort Sumter expected Planter